Here's some quick tips for Stellar Blade. Well, quick-ish. Hello everyone, I am Jmulls, and Stellar Blade is what I like to call a comprehensive game. There's a lot of thought and detail that has gone to a lot of elements of this game, and I tend to find that even if a game tells you about something, you may just overlook it or forget about it after playing for a long enough time. So before we even hop into the game, I just want to remind you of a few things, like boss challenge. I think the boss design in this game is one of its strengths, and the combat system in this game is so dang fun, you might just find yourself wanting to go back and challenge these fights just to see if you can do an even better job than before. Well, in the main menu, you can just quickly access the boss challenge and go through all the fights that you have actually done so far. Doing so will even reward you a few outfits depending upon what fights you do and what difficulty you do them on. Yeah, this game has more content than you think. I know one of the biggest concerns when it comes to, Stellar Blade being a PlayStation game on PC is if you have to sign into PlayStation Network or not. And don't worry, I've been playing this game for a few hours and I have not even signed into PlayStation at all. So if that's a big concern for you, don't particularly worry about it. The options menu is one of those things you can easily overlook. However, there are a few settings here that I think you may want to pay attention to. The big one for me being auto-loot. If you find yourself annoyed having to actually manually loot items in this game, just throw on auto-loot and it's kind of self-explanatory. I never find myself not wanting an item that I find in the world or that drops from an enemy, so just having auto-loot on makes it a more seamless experience for me and makes it better. Though if you're in for more cosmetic choices, you can actually alter the ponytail length of Eve in the menu as well, under gameplay. Funnily enough, it's right below auto-loot, because, those are related. You can either go for a long ponytail, a short ponytail, or just no ponytail at all. So if you want to mix and match depending upon what outfits or accessories you put on Eve, the world's your oyster. No modding required. As a general rule of thumb, there's a lot of options in the actual settings menu, and if there's a particular mechanic that you find over the course of the game that you just don't vibe with, you find off-putting or annoying, there's probably a setting that you can alter to augment that experience, like making ranged combat just easier, or just enable auto-aim for that, fishing controls, because let's be honest, it's the real game here. Just as a general rule of thumb, I like turning off chromatic aberration, film grain, and motion blur, because I think they make games just look bad. Those options exist in Stellar Blade and you can just turn them off if you want. They're under the graphics in the options menu. If you're playing on an actual handheld PC like a Steam Deck or something along those lines, there's an option under Interface for a handheld UI mode. So if you find the UI a bit hard to read, or just too small overall, might want to check out that option. Speaking of though, I would highly recommend checking out the accessibility options in this game. I know accessibility options can be one of those things that's easy to overlook, especially if you don't require them generally speaking. But there's a lot of, quality of life options within them, like being able to customize the HUD. If you find it hard to see, you can add a bit of a background to it to make it pop out more, especially on more brighter surfaces, where the white interface may be a little hard to see. You can change the actual size of the menu as well. The game gives you a lot of options. And if you're someone who finds QTEs to be absolutely off-putting, you can just set them to auto-success, so you don't have to worry about them. Same thing with the puzzles. There are various puzzles that become more frequent later on, where you will be under a strict timer. Now, I think, since when I did those puzzles on the PS5 version, I think they've patched them to be a bit more lenient. However, if you just don't enjoy them, or you just don't have the reaction speed in order to pull them off, you can just disable the time limit under controls in the accessibility options, including preventing E from falling during, moments you're gonna, have to balance it or be a bit precise. Like I said, there's more options than you think here. So I would give you a recommendation to say, check these out, see what you like. Maybe an option here will drastically improve your experience or just remove a massive pain point for you. Now, as we actually dive into the game proper, there is one thing I want to point out. One of the most notable features about Stellar Blade is the ability to customize the aesthetic of Eve. She gets a lot of different outfits you acquire through various means, whether they be from vendors, in-game challenges, the works. However, if you want to customize her hair specifically, when you get to the main hub of the game, the main city, you'll know when you know know, there is a barber there. You have to do a bit of a quest line for him, but it's not too long and it's not too difficult or anything like that. But if you do that quest line with that barber, you unlock the ability to swap out the hairstyles for Eve. And those ponytail like length settings from before still apply here. So if you want to unlock another route of customization in this game, be on the lookout for that. I tend to find, especially in games like Stellar Blade, it's very easy to gloss over the actual gear system the game can have, because you're so focused on the combat and getting better at the combat, you overlook basic elements of the actual game. Just keep your eye out on your exospine and your gear as you acquire more. There's a bunch of different builds you can go down. If you want a decent early game build, I would recommend one that focuses in on beta energy recharge, because your beta attacks tend to always be pretty good, especially if you upgrade them in the skill tree later on. But even like out of the gate, your beta skills are extremely usable and valuable. So I tend to find just getting those online more often than not, on top of just parrying or dodging, whatever you want to do, can make you feel and just be way more powerful, especially against some of these more difficult fights you can encounter as the game goes on. They can be a great get out of jail free card because they can also sometimes stun the boss fight if you're using the right one. Or if you're surrounded by a bunch of mobs, it gives you a good avenue for some AoE. I would also recommend not forgetting about your usable items. There are a bunch of consumables. They range from things that can heal you or benefit you to just grenades that can affect the boss, or just regular enemies you're fighting. You don't get an infinite number of them, but there's something to keep in the back of your mind, especially if you're coming across a fight that's just really hard for you, or a situation that's just, let's say, not to your advantage. They can give you the boost over the hill that you need. Personally, early on when it comes to actually upgrading outside of the skill tree, I'm just hoarding all my materials until I get later into the game and I unlock more exospines and gears, and then I'll look into actually upgrading those things, because early on, you don't really need anything like that. So I tend to prefer pooling my resources until I get to a point where I'm like, this is a build I really want to invest in, and then I can just go full beans into it. Let's talk about the skill tree, because it can be a little bit overwhelming just because of how many options you actually have available to you. I think this is also one of Stellar Blade's greatest strengths, is just the different builds the game allows you to go down. Early on, you have access to like 3 circular trees: survival, attack, and beta. You unlock a couple extra ones down the line, but the one I highly recommend you invest in the most is survival. Why is that? It gives you a lot of utility that I tend to find is frequently usable and helpful, particularly when it comes to augmenting either your dodge or your parry. I'm a player that prefers to parry personally, so I invest more into parrying. However, if you're someone who prefers dodging just because it feels better for you or it's more enjoyable, well then naturally just go down the dodge tree and pick up the things that you think are pretty good there. There are a couple of nodes I would highly recommend you pick up just for the hell of it, that being your focus boost for your parry to make it easier to use a perfect parry, so you get a larger window for that, and reflex boost to make it easier to use perfect dodge. I tend to find you're going to be dodging and or parrying a lot in this game, so just, especially with how hectic some of these fights can be, if you're not looking to make a pro montage for YouTube or TikTok or anything like that, I would recommend picking these things up. There are 2 skills that I also highly recommend early on. One of them the game borderline forces you to take, which is Blink. So when an enemy does a fatal attack and they're glowing blue, you move forward and you hit the B button if you're on an Xbox controller, or the circle button if you're on a PlayStation controller, and Eve will do this sick teleport behind the enemy follow-up attack. It's really nice. That ability is complemented by another ability called Repulse, where if the color is not blue but purple, you move backwards and hit the B button or the circle button, again depending on if you're using Xbox or PlayStation controls. You'll do this, again, sick backflip to not get hit, right? Now, the game basically forces you to take Blink, but it doesn't force you to take Repulse. I recommend picking that thing up because there will be fights that utilize abilities that you can use a Repulse for. It's very cheap, just pick it up. And honestly, you can also then pick up Threat Detection to make it easier to use Blink and Repulse, but I tend to find the windows to use Blink and Repulse to be forgiving enough where I haven't really needed it yet. Though it is only 2 SP, so if you find the need to pick it up, there you go. The timing can be a little bit awkward if you don't read. Look, we were all there at some point, let's face mess up here. You want to hit the B button, essentially inputs to utilize blink or repulse, when your weapon glows the color, not when the boss does it. That doesn't matter. It's when your weapon glows, that's your timing. And if you're struggling with any of these actual timings, whether it be parrying, dodging, blinking, or repulsing, again, go to a campsite and use the training mode. The game forces you to utilize it early on, but it's very easy to overlook it later on. So if you find yourself just being rusty, or you're just not figuring something out through regular play, use a training mode. It's there for a reason. Now, dodging has its own analog to this. However, I use parry primarily. So things I recommend picking up are things like counter 1 and counter 2. That way, when you do a perfect parry, you can utilize a follow-up attack. And you have options. Counter 1, essentially, where if you do a perfect parry, you hold the X button if you're on Xbox controls, or the square button if you're on PlayStation controls, or like left mouse click. You hold that button, then you follow it up with either right click, the Y button, or the triangle button. And you can do a nice little combo. I would recommend wait for the enemy's combo to be over before doing this, so you don't just get, like, caught off guard, but go wild, experiment. Dying doesn't really do that much. Go wild, have your fun, experiment, pull off some sick combos. That's the joy of the game. It's a nice little way to just get an extra benefit for pulling off a perfect parry or a perfect dodge that chances are you're going to try to utilize a lot throughout this game. However, circling back to something I talked about before, I highly value beta attacks. They are these special abilities that consume beta gauge or beta energy that you build up over the course of combat. You have a few varieties, but you start off with 2 of them. Triplet and Slash. Slash being your AoE, Triplet being good for single target. There's also a Shockwave and Shield Breaker, but I don't want to talk about those specifically right now. What I really care about is building up beta energy to utilize these skills as often as we possibly can. So there's a few skill points I would recommend you picking up just to make it easier for beta attacks to, well, become more and more available. Under the attack tree, you can pick up things like Beta Energy Recharge 1 and Beta Energy Recharge 2. So when you land an attack, you're building up beta energy. And then again, under the survival tree, you can pick up things like Beta Energy Recharge 1 and Beta Energy Recharge 2, so that when you hit a perfect parry, you're also increasing your beta energy. I find myself having access to beta attacks quite often, and they can be an absolute lifesaver. They can change the flow of combat and put you from a disadvantageous position to an advantageous position. Don't be afraid to read these skill trees and just go, that sounds really cool, I'm gonna go for that. It looks like a lot at first, but it's really not that deep, and it allows you to specialize into various elements of the combat system that you might find more enjoyable than others. And if you further invest into the beta attacks themselves, they become insanely powerful and cool. As just another point of order before we wrap up here, eventually you will find yourself coming face to face with more like open world inspired zones. You may either really like the side content in this game, or you may view it to just be kind of filler or grindy, and it may not be your cup of tea. I would fully recommend just playing the game, and this is going to sound really basic, just the way you want. If you start to find yourself becoming sour when it comes to the open zone areas, just move on to the next main objective. You can just do that. If you don't care about the side stories in this game, if you don't care about exploring the open zones in this game, you don't really have to. So don't burn yourself out by like trying to 100% an open zone when you really just want to do another story mission and go on about your day. I would recommend taking your time to stop and smell the roses, because the music and the visuals in this game are absolutely god tier. They're so dang good, but we all have our own preferences at the end of the day, so don't actively play the game in a way that's going to sour you on it. It's a game. Play it to have fun and engage yourself with it. And now here's where you come in. These are just a few of the tips I can give for like more early on into the game. Leave a comment down below with either a question that you have, or if you have a tip that I haven't talked about or you want to like further a point, leave in the comment down below. Help each other out. As I said before, the game does tell you quite a good bit about it. It's very easy to forget as you put more and more hours in, especially if you take a bit of a break from the game and come back to it at a later point. I hope this video was of help. If it was, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again.